Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a proud, longtime Illinois legacy educator. I served for over 20 years in Chicago Public Schools as a teacher and administrator, and my father served 40 years before me. So it's absolute pleasure to be here as we go through this time of transformational change in our society and education. So thank you. There'll be a few QR codes in the presentation deck today. I have resources for you. And so at your leisure, scan the QR code so that you'll have access to the resources as we move through and get to the place where you'll specifically want to look at them later on in the presentation. But I'm going to get started. And today we're going to talk about AI in action, equity, experimentation, and educational leadership. So what are our learning topics for today? First thing I'm going to have you do is contemplate your AI story. Then I'll give you a little bit of foundational information about the what and why of generative AI. I'm going to point you to some careful considerations I want you to think about before we begin to implement AI into our educational communities. I'm going to point you in the direction of research on AI in education. We're going to have a good discourse around equity, ethics, and bias. I'm going to lead you in the direction of experimentation. Then we'll have some time for a leadership reflection at the end and questions. And there'll be a couple times where I pause throughout to give you the opportunity to ask questions at specific points. And there'll also be times where I ask you to engage in the chat. So this resource is an early preview. It's my AI skill building framework. And there are tools in here that you can use yourself as an educator or that you can implement with age-appropriate students. So I encourage you to scan the QR code and have access to these resources. These resources are also embedded in my upcoming book release that I'll talk about in a few minutes. So let's take a minute and reflect. What is your AI story? Which of these do you regularly encounter in your everyday life? And I'd like you to respond in the chat if anything stands out to you. Online shopping recommendations? No, that's a big one for me. Smart assistants, chatbots, auto text prediction, grammar check on your email and documents. How about social media, shopping and streaming recommendations? Camera, visual identification tools, adaptive assessment and learning platforms, our NWEA, our IXL, anything that modifies and learns. So go ahead and put in the chat any of these that stand out to you that you have experience with, because you're already interacting with AI. Yeah, I see all of the above, right? Absolutely. So AI is already permeated into everything that we're doing in our lives, online, technologically. And so it's not something that's new. And a lot of people think, oh, AI, it's brand new. The current evolution of it is new. The technology is progressing rapidly, but it's not something that's completely new. Let me give you a little bit of my AI story in context. As I mentioned before, my background, I have 23 plus years in Chicago Public Schools, and I was a high school science teacher before I transitioned into UIC's Urban Education Leadership Program and became an urban school district leader. I was a part of the team that built our newest STEM high school in Chicago, and we did that during the pandemic. It was quite an adventure. From that, we took a trip to the ASU GSV conference, which is an annual conference, and I highly recommend it. It's the largest convening at the intersection of education, educational technology, and entrepreneurship. So if this is something that is of interest to you, I would encourage you to check that out. But what I took away from that conference was one thing. I was standing in the back of one of the rooms of the superintendent's workshops, and I heard the then superintendent of Miami, who is now the superintendent of LAUSD, Alberto Carvalho, just throw out an afterthought at the end of the session. And he said, hey, everybody pay attention to AI and check out a report called the 2035 Skills Imperative. So we've all been to conferences and we know that they're a lot of fun and learning at the same time. So I took a note to myself, and later on when I got time, I pulled the report. And I was really surprised by the statistics that I saw in terms of the predictions of what would happen in the job market, changes in skills that are needed, predicted at the year 2035 for students. So it's something that was very impactful for me and kind of made me go down this direction of how is automation and artificial intelligence going to change the way we serve our students, what we teach them, how we teach them, and how we prepare them for our increasingly automated society. Then ChatGPT became what it is today, a few months after that. And, at first I played around with it just like everyone else, experimenting. And it dawned on me at a certain point that this technology really has limitless potential. And when you listen to people talk about not just AI, but AGI, and as we shift into quantum computing, there's so much technological gain that we are going to have in the next few years. It's unbelievable. So get ready. As with anything, it's important that we ensure all learners and educators and communities have access to the technology. And so I realized that AI literacy would be necessary. And if and when it's done not properly and access to the technology, it can potentially serve as an educational equalizer. And Memorial Day of 2023 is really when this whole journey took root for me. And I began writing and creating content and materials. And I started this journey as the tech ed maven. And here I am today, almost 2.5 years later. And I am about to be a published solution tree author of Experimenting with AI, effective next week. So if you're interested in learning more about this work, Arlen has a link. Thank you. I see the clapping hands. Arlen has a link for the free resources and free reproducibles that are accompanying the book. So he's going to drop that in the chat so that everyone has access to that. And you can take those resources back to your school or organization immediately and begin to implement them into your work. So I'm excited to be here. And actually, this is, when me and Arlen selected the date for this webinar, it was really exciting because it would be right before the book launch. So this is where we're at. So let's get into it. The what and whys of generative AI. As I mentioned before, generative AI is not new. It's been evolving since the 1950s, and it encompasses technologies that we interact with daily. ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all those similar platforms are a subset of machine learning called natural language processing or large language models, and you'll see those abbreviations and acronyms commonly. These generative AI technologies create new content like text, images, videos, music from our natural language instructions. And that's new. Before, in order to interact, you had to be able to code. But now we can use our natural language to be able to give the computer software instructions to be able to generate the content that we want to produce. Integrating this technology into education is essential for interactive and personalized learning and tutoring experiences. And urgency for integration is clear. I'm pretty sure we all believe that, and that's why you're here. Delaying it risks perpetuating digital redlining, which is a systemic inequality in access to technology. And so, as we move forward, as a former school leader, you never want to put anything in front of kids that potentially could be dangerous or staff. So I'm going to lay out for you what I call the 4 careful considerations of AI. The first thing we want to make sure is that we are ensuring that our digital classrooms are safe. We need to protect data. We need to make sure that unauthorized access, we need to make sure all of our systems are in place. Our chief information officers have everything protected, and that we're only using the platforms that we're authorized to use within our school or district. The second thing is privacy, which connects directly. We want to make sure that our teachers are informed and educated that we should not be putting any identifying information into chatbots. I know early on, Teachers were experimenting and doing very creative things, but there wasn't necessarily a lot of guidance. And there were cases of people building out IEPs with student information and things like that. So we want to make sure we don't do that, because we're not quite sure, unless your district has assured you that the model that you're working on is something that's for internal use only. Just using regular Chat GPT to do things like that with student information would not be appropriate. We want to look at a lot of the ethical concerns with generative AI, and there are so many of them. And that's why I challenge you to look at the link for Experimenting with AI, because all of the discussions, which are the free reproducibles, tackle these ethical challenges. And then bias. We're going to spend a great deal of time talking about that today, but it's essential to ensure that we have equitable educational outcomes. And in our society at large, we want to make sure that these technologies are representative of all groups of people. And of course, I'm going to point you in the direction of research to get you started on your own. The first artifact that I point everyone to initially is AI in the Future of Teaching and Learning. And this was a document that was produced in May of 2023, a few months after ChatGPT was released. Now, this document with the regular Department of Education has been archived since then, but you can still find this artifact online. Just Google AI in the Future of Teaching and Learning from the Office of Educational Technology. The second is the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, which defines who should and should not be using these technologies by age grade. And then lastly, the AI Bill of Rights, which is not education specific, but refers to our rights in a technological society as humans. So these are three places that I like to send everyone to get started. And I use these references, of course, in the book and a lot more, but that's a great starting point. So here we go. How can we begin the discussion around equitable and bias-free artificial intelligence? And I stress the word begin because this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So I'm going to show you some of my work. I do realize that I'm presenting to a group of educators, so I apologize in advance for any spelling or grammatical errors. This was my actual work, and so it's authentic. It's not something that I was proofreading. It was internal. But I thought when this generated for me, that it would be so impactful and just really demonstrate what is going on behind the scenes. So I want you to take a look. I'm going to give you a little context as well as I press play. I was creating social media content to honor African Americans in STEM, and I wanted to have words and pictures to go along with these Facebook pieces of content. And I asked ChatGPT to generate me a list of African Americans, men and women from different generations. And it did exactly what I wanted with this part, right? Looked really good. Everything was accurate at the time. And then I asked it to create pictures. And I wanted to start with Benjamin Banneker for African American History Month. And this is what ChatGPT gave me in my chat about African American History Month as a replication of what the technology believed Benjamin Banneker resembled. Does anyone see any challenges or anything that looks a little off here? Put it in the chat. And then, as you can see, I began to get frustrated with ChatGPT and brought to its attention that we're working on a chat of African Americans. Now, does anyone have any idea what may have happened here? And the chat is open. I see bias. Yes, I would love to hear more. So when we think about the internet and we think about ChatGPT or Google Gemini or any of these technologies, and we think about where they get their information from to create this content or recreate it, what do we know about the internet? Is it a place that is glowingly representative of all groups, walks of life from around the world, or is it kind of narrowly focused on a specific subset? What do you guys think? With minorities facing repression in history textbooks and then info being used to train yes, it is unfortunately going to regurgitate the same bias. That is absolutely true. When we think about the internet, it's biased. It just is. And if generative AI is feeding off of the content of the internet and then regurgitating it, making patterns of the information and regurgitating it, it is then and therefore going to concentrate that bias from the internet. And to be honest with you, I did not really realize the level of bias on the internet at all because you're not looking at the internet at large. Generally, you're going to specific places, looking at specific things. I knew that there were problems on the internet, but I did not know the level of it until I began making images with generative AI. There have been so many situations of images that I've created that honestly, oftentimes the images are more biased than they are not biased. And so to that point, I'm going to show you another example. That conference I mentioned, ASU GSV, they contacted me. You can see I'm in the same background. And they said, hey, we want you to apply for our 2024 AI Classroom Innovator. And I said, well, the application's due tonight. They wanted a video. I was so confident on generative AI being biased that I was able to throw on my blazer and go downstairs and come downstairs to my office in one take and create this.
Hi, my name is Dr. Stacie Chana, and it is a pleasure to have an opportunity to present at this year's AIR show. I'm going to start us off with a little do now. Let's take a look at this prompt. Create me a hyper-realistic image of happy children. Then create a hyper-realistic image of sad children. Here's our happy children. And here's our sad children. What do we see? What differences do we notice?
What do you see? Sad means non-white. Yeah. Yeah. And so I challenge you when you leave here as your homework assignment to play around with the images and ask a question, ask it to generate images, and just see from the results what you create from these softwares. Does it appear to be biased or not? Right? I love giving away tools. And so this document right here is it's on my LinkedIn page, and that's where the QR code will take you. But it's a carousel post that you can download that will show you some of the features of ChatGPT. And I created it specifically for educators. So I encourage you to download this if you are still learning how to work with the different parts of the technology. This is another great place to start to kind of give you an idea of some of the things you can do as you work through. Now let's talk about this. North Carolina, they were the first state to have generative AI guidance. And what do they have to say? Well, because generative AI models are trained on the internet, there's always the potential for inherent societal biases surrounding gender roles, race, religion, and politics. How about Oregon? Algorithmic bias in AI systems can perpetuate and amplify societal biases, leading to discriminatory outcomes, particularly affecting marginalized communities. California, they're definitely a leader in this. Algorithmic bias refers to the presence of unfair and discriminatory outcomes in machine learning algorithms and AI systems due to the data used to train them or the design choices made during their development. As educators and educational leaders, our commitment to confronting hate, bigotry, racism, and bias aligns seamlessly with the need to raise awareness about algorithmic bias and its far-reaching societal effects. By integrating these concepts, we can empower educators and students to become informed advocates in the fight against bias and discrimination. Let's talk about another issue: technological redlining. Now, technological redlining is a term, and I'll let you guys drop in the chat where you may have heard the term redlining before. But technological redlining within education amplifies inequalities, segregating access and opportunities based on socioeconomic status, perpetuating digital divides and educational disparities across communities. So I think back to the pandemic. I was an administrator in Chicago at the time. And when the pandemic first started, there were some schools that had Chromebooks and were one-to-one, and the students knew how to use them. And the principals were able to say, okay, everybody just take your Chromebook home. And the teachers, over the course of the next few months, as COVID rolled out before we had any vaccinations, when everyone was just at home, were able to continue some continuity of instruction. Unfortunately, that was only a small percentage of the schools and communities in the city. The vast majority of the schools in Chicago, as well as I'm sure a lot of other places around the state of Illinois, were scrambling. Students were sent home. Parents were not even able necessarily to be communicated with. Not all students have access to the internet at home. So even if they had a device, they may not have been able to connect. Maybe they had internet, but they had no device. And so the response to that was, okay, we'll Xerox copy packets and people can come to the schools and pick the packets up, but they're never going to be returned. They're never going to be graded. You're not going to get any feedback or any live instruction. And that is what school in Chicago looked like up until that summer after quarantine, was lessened. And so, and I know that's indicative of what the entire nation looked like, the entire world, to be quite honest with you. So we have to think about technological access in aspects of access to devices. We have to have access to broadband internet. We have to have access to the actual software to use the technology. And we have to have access to instruction or someone to teach us how to use all of these components. And so just with internet, just with access during COVID, let's think about access to generative AI. How many of your students as age appropriate are actually receiving instruction in how to use these technologies? There are definitely schools across the nation that are doing this and doing this well already. And so we have to think about the students that we are charged with serving and educating and work towards empowering them to be viable in this new economy, in the new job market, and equipped with the new skills that employers are requiring as of now. So we're going to take a brief pause because I want you to take some time to reflect before we move into the experimentation portion of the webinar. And go ahead, jump in the chat and reflect on the following. Which AI education consideration, safety, privacy, ethics, or bias, is most pressing right now for your school or district community? And then just think of one way that you can initiate productive dialogue when you return to your school and shape thoughtful practices around it. I'm going to give you guys about 1 to 2 minutes to put your responses in the chat. So, yeah, Mike, I see ethics is the primary concern at the moment, which really encompasses all of these. Our students are obviously aware, but use it at the most basic level to cheat. Yeah. I hope to introduce a plan to educate our staff and then students on how to better maximize its potential. That's awesome. And as we wait for more reflections, I'll just move forward for the sake of time so we have room for questions at the end. Now, let's get to the good part. We know a lot of people are experimenting with AI. And so I had to get through the parts that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of, which would be the four careful considerations. And now we're going to shift into the experimentation portion. And we're going to talk a little bit how we can experiment with generative AI as educational leaders. Now, the first concept, if you're unfamiliar, is this term prompt engineering. And so maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, when ChatGPT came out, prompt engineering was all the rage. People were making $400,000. There were jobs being posted for prompt engineering, and people would write these long dissertation style prompts, and that was necessary at that point. But these technologies evolve rapidly. And so everyone who is interacting with generative AI is executing on a skill called prompt engineering. And as we move through the technologies and into automation and humanoid robots, it is going to be increasingly important that we are able to communicate with technologies in a way that is understandable for them, not confusing to the technology, and that we are able to get the outcomes that we desire. And so the term that I hear a lot is garbage in, garbage out. And so having a clear framework to learn how to write prompts until it becomes automatic and to teach students what is in a high quality prompt is a good place to start. And mastering this skill is critical for AI literacy. It's going to be essential for workforce development, and it's going to be vital for navigating that increasingly digital world that we're in. So let's talk about the prompt recipe. And these tools are in that AI skills resource. So you will, if when you go to that link and scan through, it will send a copy of all of the frameworks to you. And these frameworks are the frameworks that are interwoven throughout the experiments in experimenting with AI. So you're getting a huge preview of the content of the book today. So the first thing you want to do is define a purpose. What is the purpose of this prompt? Spirit, like what are you trying to achieve? What is your objective here? And the next thing you want to consider is what relevant information do you need to include? The third thing when writing a prompt is you want to leave it open-ended. If you ask yes or no questions, then you're going to get a yes or no answer. So if you want to maximize the creative potential of the technology, then make your prompts and queries as open-ended as possible. This is a big one, meaningful and clear. You want to make sure you're not adding extraneous information or things that are confusing or telling it not to do something. You should be focusing on what you want it to do so that there's no confusion. Remember, these are not human beings that are able to interpret nuances all the time. So you want to make sure you're clear and direct and to the point. Personalization. I have my custom instructions set on the back end of my Chat GPT, which is my tool of choice, but I use the others as well, depending on context. But I use Chat GPT the most because I've been using it the longest and it knows me the best. And so I don't have to start from scratch. It's automatically learned me and personalized to me and who my audience is and the way that I want it to generate content. But when you're first starting out, it doesn't really have knowledge of you. And so you want to add personalization to your prompts until the tool that you're using on a regular basis knows you, learns you, and you don't have to add so much personalization after that. And lastly, thought provoking. You want to make sure whatever you're asking these technologies, thought provoking, new ideas, formulate new information, put things together in a creative way. So you really want to maximize your skills here. And so the prompt recipe, being an educator, I love acronyms, especially a science teacher. So these tools, prompt recipe, the check AI framework, the bias identification framework, and the is it real or not framework, which helps to analyze content for deep fake and misinformation, are all included in the AI skills guide and included throughout the book, Experimenting with AI. I was a teacher, so I know sometimes when you give out the assignment or you give out the resource the first time, people don't get it. So if you did not get your AI skill building toolkit, this is your next opportunity to scan away and do so if you did not get it the first time. And you will have a series of tools that look like this, graphic organizers that you can distribute, utilize however you see fit. Now, let's take a look at an actual sample prompt applying the prompt recipe. So this was the prompt I wrote, and I'm going to do a close read of it to show you the different parts. So the first thing is the purpose, right? And so the purpose of this prompt was to brainstorm the potential applications of AI in education, period. The relevant information I included was I wanted it to span pre-K 12, higher ed, and lifelong learning environments because I work and serve all of those groups. So I wanted to make sure that it was inclusive. And so I included that so that the AI did not just narrow it to one specific subgroup. Open-ended, I wanted it to list both innovative uses and potential challenges educators in diverse settings might face. I wanted it to create content that I may not have thought of. And that's also one of the skills in generative AI, having the technology look over and identify risks and different things that you may have missed. Meaningful and clear. I told it very specifically to keep in mind the varied needs of students and staff from different backgrounds and contexts. I didn't want any confusion, so I'm giving it those extra instructions to do what it needs to do. Personalization. I started it out personalized as an educator shaping the future of education and outcomes for students. Adding just that little bit of information in the beginning, particularly when you're first utilizing a new chatbot, will really go a long way in helping you get an answer that is appropriate for your audience. And thought provoking. How might these AI driven changes redefine classroom dynamics and teacher student relationships in the coming decade? And the last step, once you have a prompt and you put it in, is of course you need to check. Is this accurate? Is this, reflective of what I needed, what I wanted to do? And you go back and you refine and make it better and keep moving forward. So these are just some sample prompts that teachers have created, uh, potentially role playing a situation, creating an alternative assessment, generating an inquiry, fact checking information, creating templates and protocols is one of my favorite, and creating math problems. There, at first, generative AI was not that great in math, but now it is really good in math, even statistics. So if you would like to connect, these are my social medias. I am most active on LinkedIn. I would love to connect, and Facebook. And I have a YouTube channel that I am building out in process. So there will be content there as well for you. And I'll leave these up just for a few seconds in case anyone wants to scan. And I'm sure Arlen will send out my resources after the presentation as well. If you're looking for more resources, this is how it began. I have an IAA class that I run called Ace Instructional Leadership. I have several dates coming up in the next month or so. So if you're interested in getting your IAA class and learning to leverage generative AI for instructional leadership to support your teacher coaching, we'd love to have you. As well as I do professional development for teachers related to how to integrate the technology into their planning, preparation, and overall improvement of their teaching practices to save time as aligned to the Danielson framework because we are Illinois educators. And lastly, as I mentioned before, Experimenting with AI will be released next week, and there will be a plethora. I think it's about 289 pages. So it is your textbook on integrating generative AI to teach your teachers, to teach your parents, to teach your students, everyone. It is meant to be applicable to all learners, no matter where they are, and as developmentally appropriate. That probably wouldn't want to give the book to a kindergartner. And here's the social media again. And now we'll have our Q&A. Arlen?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Chana, for all that wonderful information, the power of AI, the pitfalls, of course, to look out for as well. Appreciate the full scope you covered during this presentation. Mike asked a question, and he says you might have addressed it in the following slides, but I think still important to discuss is, do you still think defining AI's role in the prompt is necessary? For instance, assume the role of a school administrator with extensive technology background. Is that still necessary when using AI?
If someone is first starting out using the technology, it is. In my chat GPT, I have custom instructions set on the back end. But if someone is just creating their account in the beginning, fresh, brand new, the technology has no idea who they are.
Yeah, so it's good to kind of seed it with what role the voice that the AI should be coming from.
Correct. And as you utilize the technology more and more, so ChatGPT keeps a memory. And so I paid $20 a month for a subscription. And so it very well knows who I am, how I like things created. I even have it, I like when I'm writing content for like a non-professional audience, so if I'm just writing something for the general public, I have the grade level and the quantitative features and qualitative features of text that I like to include to make everything readable. So I have really specific things that I have over time asked it to do that it has remembered in the memory and now automatically does. But if you're just starting out, it doesn't know you. So you need to really be strategic about helping it learn you.
And to clarify, the paid version, it just gives you more access and I think a slightly different version of the AI that you're working with.
Actually, the technology is the same. And this is funny. When I do, it's not funny, but it's an exact example of equitable access. So when I do a full day professional development or even a half day for teachers, and we do the ACER teacher evaluations or we do the ACER instructional leadership, we're all in the room together. They're using the tool. And those who have a free account run out of context somewhere around midway through, because the free accounts only give you so much access. Whereas the paid account, I can pretty much use it all day. So it's the same technology. It's just you're only getting a sample of the percentage of usage when you're in a non-paid subscription. Also, if you just go on and you haven't gone in and created an account, you just go to OpenAI and it doesn't just use the public chat bot, it's not going to remember you. It's not going to remember anything about you because you haven't created an account where it's building memory.
Okay, and is that version, you don't have an account, is that version unlimited or does that limit you to so many prompts as well?
You can create your own account on a free version.
Yeah.
It's just going to limit you.
Okay, got it. Angela put into the chat, will you please show the properties code again or include the link in the chat to the properties QR code that you had up?
I'm not sure. I need a little bit more information about properties.
Okay, yeah, Angela, if you want to type into chat what was on the slide, we can go back to that. Any other questions for Dr. Chana in the chat? We've got plenty of time here for anybody's questions or comments or thoughts or your own experience with using AI that maybe Dr. Chana could help out with. George says, I think she meant the slide with the QR code for the AI resources. Maybe that one.
This one?
Oh, Angela says you already provided the link. So I think she's got what she needs.
Oops.
What did you use to design your slides, Stacie?
Okay, so my tech stack, right?
Yeah.
I use a couple things. So I use Canva. And a lot of this is from my experience in marketing, school marketing, being a high school principal in Chicago. Like we, want to recruit students. So I definitely got that feel of that marketing from that. For the QR codes, I use a software called MeQR. But I also use ChatGPT. And so a lot of times I will make a slide and I'm like, I'm not sure if that's visually appealing to the audience. I will take a screenshot of it in ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to take on the role of an expert graphic designer and to give me feedback on the designs or whatever I've created to, maximize visibility.
Oh, that's really cool. And what does it give you back when you put an image like that?
It just depends. Sometimes it'll say it's great. Sometimes it'll tell me, it's too much text on the page. Sometimes, it'll say contrast. So it just all depends on what it is. It is really a major source of feedback for me. I was already a pretty strong writer, having gone through UIC's urban ed program. And Dr. Tozer is my dissertation chair. And so He would probably agree with that, except my use of commas. But when I write now, I'm always running it through ChatGPT before I send it out, because there'll be grammatical mistakes, readability, and so I can really personalize and perfect content using the technology. That's one of my favorite uses. Another use is, I have the app on my phone and I talk to the app. It talks out loud. And so I don't know if anyone else does that, but I can be somewhere and an idea will pop in my head and I'll just press the button on the app and it will say, "Hey, how are you doing this afternoon?" And I will say, "Hey, I just got an idea around creating an IAA course specific for high school teachers," or something like that. And, it will capture the idea so that later on, when I come back to it, it's there. It's already built out a little bit around it. And I don't lose those in time moments of creation because I've captured it in the technology in the moment.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's one of my favorite uses.
Yeah, I've not used the app, but I'm assuming it works much like the browser version where you can sign in with an account and it keeps track of all the prompts.
Hello. I have my volume turned down. How are you today?
Hey there, Doc. I'm doing well, and I'm glad you caught that volume thing. Happens to the best of us. How can I help you out today?
I'm on a webinar for educators in the state of Illinois, and I'm just modeling for them how I use verbal usage of the app to capture ideas as I move around in my day-to-day life.
Absolutely. That sounds like a fantastic demo. So feel free to just let me know what ideas you want to throw at me, and I'll help you show them how it.
So you get the point.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
The personal assistant right there. That's great.
And so that's, to be quite honest with you, if you look at generative AI in that way, it will really help you day to day. And there's so many technical things you can do to integrate it, and there's so many different tools. But I'm a big proponent of everyone learning how to use these foundational models: ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, and they're intimidating. You open it up and you're just looking at like a screen with nothing there, and you don't know where to start. And that's why, I wrote Experimenting with AI to explain from a very entry point level, the entry experiments, brainstorming, things of that nature, all the way up to complex uses of the technology, like creating online video games. And so there's something for everybody, no matter where your touch point is. And it's really going to change the way it's already changing the way we work. And it's going to change the way we do school very soon.
All right, that's incredible. Well, thank you for that demo and all these thoughts on AI in action. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Let me take one last look here. Any comments or feedback for Dr. Chana, you can type those into the chat as well. I will be sending out a link to the recording tomorrow morning and a link to the webinar evaluation. When our Illinois participants complete that evaluation, you'll get the ISB evidence of completion form for entering your 1 hour of professional development credit for attending us live in this webinar. I want to thank all of our participants, and again, thanks to you, Dr. Chana, for all of your time and effort to put this presentation together for us.
Thank you, and I wish you guys the best of success.